Hello, my name is Beth Dixon, and this is lesson 2, homework, and this should help you do questions 1 through 4. So let's begin, and we will start with the square root of 96. And with these, we are just putting them in the calculator. The majority of your questions will not be whole numbers, so we have to use the calculators to get these. And we're just trying to estimate these. So we put them in the calculator and then we'll round. Remember, the square root is asking what number multiplied by itself will give us 96. And this will not be a whole number, so we want the best estimation. And so what we're going to do, I'm cleared my calculator. I don't have to stand so close. This is a good camera. And then we're going to press the second key. Notice that it gives you the up arrow. The second key, in my case, is blue, so it gives me all the blue words. And then I'm going to hit this button right here because that blue is the square root. And so now I have a square root. In the older versions of a TI, 84, 83 series. In other words, in the 83, it will begin a parentheses, so that's okay. And I will type the number, which is 96. In the older versions, you would want to close that parentheses by typing the closed parentheses and then pressing enter. Since I have the newer version, I'm good. If I were going to type something else after the square root, I would hit over so that I'm out of the square root. In this case, I don't have to do that. I can just press enter. And there is my number. I'm going to write that on the board. So that gives me 9.7997958971. And in this case, let's round this to the nearest hundredth. The nearest hundredth is the second decimal place, tens, hundredths. So this is the tenths, this is the hundredths. So we're going to round to the nearest hundredth. That means we look to the next decimal, which is a 7. So that means this decimal place will round up and will go up. Since it's a 9, we'll want to look at the next 2 decimals. So instead of looking at 9, let's look at 79. And so that means instead of 9 going up, let's look at 79. And so 79 goes up to the next number. So that means to the nearest hundredth, this becomes 9.80. Okay, let's look at the next number, which let's look at the square root of 209. Again, you're just going to type in second square root, then 209, and then press enter. This time we're going to round to the nearest thousandth place, tenths, hundredths, thousandths, which will be the third decimal place. And so 1/10, hundredths, thousandths. Looking to the next number, that is an 8, which means the 6 will round up. So that 6 will go up. So that would be 14.457. And why did I do it to a different decimal place? Because every problem will tell you what you round to. So read carefully as you look at the directions. So the next problem, we have the square root of 36, second square root 36. And again, I'm just typing that in. Notice this does give me a whole number. So if it says round to the it says round to the nearest whole number, round to the nearest 10th as needed, that would just be 6. It's not needed to round, it is a whole number. This is the case where it does come out evenly or a whole number because 6 times 6 is 36. Okay. we have the square root of 0.0169. The decimals in this work just like anything else. And if I type decimals in, I just type them in. In this case, it does come out nice and evenly. So that would come out to 0.13. And again, I am typing those decimals in I'm putting the leading zeros in. They're not necessary, but just so that you can see and make sure you know where the decimal places are. Okay. Let me erase these problems and let's do 4 more. Let's do the square root of 0.09, the square root of 0.004, the square root of 1.96, the square root of -25. Again, we're just placing those in the calculator. The square root of 0.09. And again, some of these come out and are what we would call perfect squares because they come out to be decimals that do not repeat, that end terminal decimals. Some of these are what we call irrational numbers. Remember, an irrational number is a non-repeating, non-ending decimal. So here on the next one, the square root of 0.004 comes out to be 0.0632455532. And I'm going to round this one to the nearest thousandth, which in this case would be the 3. So we look to the 2, that means it stays the same. And so that's going to be equal to 0.063 to the nearest thousandths, which is the 3rd decimal place. And in this case, I forgot to write the leading 0 there. I'll go back and add that. And that decimal's not showing up. I forget I have to make my decimals large when I write on the board for recording purposes. Okay, let's do the square root of 1.96, which gives me 1.4. That one does not have to be rounded. Okay, and now we'll do the square root of -25. We're throwing a negative there. Notice what happens. Well, let me do it again because you don't see that. Okay, I do the square root of -25, and when I press enter, it gives me, and what does it say? It says a non-real answer. And we'll talk more about this when we do our positive and negatives, but the square root of a negative number is not allowed. There are 2 things we cannot do in the real number system. And the first that we're going to, well, one of them you should have already known, which is we do not divide by 0. And the second one is we do not take square roots of negative numbers. So this one is not a real answer. And real being a real number answer. We deal in the real number system, and that's what we're going to do. So that one's not a real answer. Okay, let's look at 3 last problems. We took some square roots of very small numbers. Whoops. Let's take a square root of a very large number. The square root of 0, and the square root of 99. Okay, let's do second square root. 3969. Whoops. At home, you should be saying, Miss Beth, you didn't type that right. The square root of 3969. And even though it's large, it's another one that comes out to be even. Well, what's the square root of 0? And you should know that one off the top of your head. It should be 0. And in both of these cases, that's because 0 times 0 gives us 0, and 63 times 63 happens to give us 3,969. Now, you shouldn't know this top one. That's why we use the calculator. And this last one is just one more to remind you that we just simply type in the square root of 99, press enter, and that gives me 9.9498. Let's round this one to 2 decimal places. That's 2. Look to the 3rd decimal place. And that means that's 9.94. The 9 next is 5 or more. It's 9. And so that means the 4 rounds up to adds 1. So that's 9.95. And that will be the answer there. And that is a quick review on how to do square roots and should help you through questions 1 through 4.